The French Revolution was a watershed event in world history that lasted from 1789 to 1799. Among other things, it saw the French abolishing feudalism, beheading their monarch, and changing their form of government from a monarchy to a republic. Internationally, it led to the Age of Revolutions, triggering the global decline of absolute monarchies and replacing them with republics and liberal democracies. So, what caused this great event? Let us study its 10 most important causes. Number 1. Social inequality in France due to the estate system. In the 1780s, the population of France was around 24,700,000, and it was divided into 3 estates. The first estate was the Roman Catholic clergy, which numbered about 100,000. The second estate consisted of the French nobility, which numbered about 400,000. Everyone else in France, including merchants, lawyers, labourers and peasants, belonged to the third estate, which comprised around 98% of the French population. The third estate was excluded from positions of honour and political power, and was looked down upon by the other estates. It was thus angered and resented its position in French society. This led to them coming together to launch the French Revolution in 1789. Number 2. Tax burden on the third estate. The first estate in France, or the clergy, owned 10% of the land, though it comprised less than 0.5% of the population. It was very wealthy and paid no taxes. It had many privileges, including the collection of tithes. Tithes was 1/10 of annual produce or earnings taken as a tax for the support of the church. The second estate, or the nobles, owned about 25% of the land. They were exempted from paying many taxes and were allowed to collect dues from peasants. In contrast, the third estate was forced to pay heavy taxes while the other two were exempted. This burdened the third estate, leading to their questioning this unjust estate system and planning to overthrow it. Number 3. The rise of the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie were the rich men and women of the third estate who started to become influential in the years leading to the revolution. They evolved into a new caste with its own agenda and political aspiration. The bourgeoisie resented the position of the first and the second estate, which they believed was derived from their efforts. Moreover, they aspired to attain political equality with the other two estates. The desire of the bourgeoisie to rid themselves of feudal and royal encroachments on their personal liberty, commercial prospects and ownership of property was one of the reasons which led to the French Revolution. Number 4. Ideas of Enlightenment philosophers. The Age of Enlightenment was an intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated the world of ideas in Europe during the 18th century. Enlightenment philosophers like John Locke, Rousseau and Montesquieu questioned the traditional absolute authority of the monarch and divisions of society like the estate system. John Locke argued that a leader may only govern a society if he had the consent of those he governed. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was against all class divisions. Baron de Montesquieu advocated for a system of government based on separation of powers. The writings of Enlightenment thinkers were discussed in France more than anywhere else, and they greatly influenced the revolutionaries. Number 5. Financial crisis due to costly wars. Throughout the 18th century, France participated in a series of expensive wars primarily against its long-term rival Great Britain. Louis XV, who ruled over France from 1715 to 1774, lost the 7 Years' War against Britain. He then drew up a plan to avenge the loss by building a larger navy and an anti-British coalition of allies. However, this only resulted in a mountain of debt. Louis XIII, grandson of Louis XIV who succeeded him in 1774, then involved France in the American War of Independence against Britain. Though United States won the war, France gained little from it. French support for the war was expensive, costing 1.066 million French livres, a huge sum at the time. This worsened the economic crisis in the nation and pushed it toward bankruptcy. Number 6. Drastic weather and poor harvests. In June 1783, Laki volcano in Iceland erupted, sending volcanic ash high into the atmosphere in Europe. This led to a severe winter in Europe in 1784, and the following summers included extreme droughts that caused poor harvests and famine. France then experienced another series of poor harvests in 1787 and 1788 with extreme winters. A decade of extreme weather conditions and poor harvests took a toll on the poor peasants of France, who were struggling to survive day to day. The frustration of the peasants angered them to revolt. Number 7. Rise in cost of bread. The situation in France worsened when poor harvests caused the price of flour to increase dramatically, which in turn raised the price of bread. Bread was the staple food for most French citizens, and it has been estimated by historians that the working class of France was spending upwards of 90% of their daily income on just bread. Louis XV implemented deregulation of the grain market, but it resulted in further increasing the bread prices. The rise in the cost of bread severely affected the common French citizens who resented the monarch for his not being able to solve the food crisis. Number 8. Ineffective leadership of Louis XV and Louis XVI. In France, as in most other European nations, the monarch ruled on the basis of the divine right of kings, the doctrine that kings derive their authority from God, not their subjects. He was thus not answerable to his subjects. However, the philosophies of Enlightenment thinkers made the public think differently. Louis XV failed to overcome the financial problems facing France. He was not able to harmonize the conflicting parties at court to arrive at coherent economic policies. Louis XVI then tried to bring about radical reforms, but failed miserably. The poor economic condition of the nation angered the masses, and they became critical of their king. Number 9. Parliament's successful opposition to reforms. Several French ministers, including Anne Robert Jacques Turgot and Jacques Necker, proposed revisions to the French tax system so as to include the nobles as taxpayers. This may have reduced the financial crisis in the nation and would have lessened the anger of the poor, as the tax system would have become more just. A parliament in France was a provincial appellate court. They were not legislative bodies, but consisted of appellate judges. The parlements were the spearheads of the nobility's resistance to royal reforms, and they prevented any reform in taxation which would include the nobility. This prevented the economy to recover and consequently put more pressure on the peasants. Number 10. Extravagant lifestyle of French monarchy. The extravagant expenditure on luxuries by the French monarchy compounded the economic crisis facing the nation and was one of the primary reasons behind the revolution. For example, the construction and remodeling of the Palace of Versailles throughout the 17th and 18th centuries incurred a huge cost to the country. These large expenditures by the French monarchy caused dissatisfaction among the public, which began to view its leaders as wasteful while they suffered due to the poor economic state of the nation. This, in turn, led to national unrest and ultimately the revolution. For more info on the French Revolution, visit the URL in the description. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.